In this video, I'm going to introduce the idea of surface area. I'm guessing this is probably something you've worked with a little bit in middle school, but some of these things are definitely going to be new. So one of the things you really have to understand the difference between, before you can really be comfortable working with surface area problems, is the difference between a prism and a pyramid. And I think we briefly discussed this in section 9.8, but I don't think we went really in depth into it. So anyway, just a little bit of terminology here. A prism is a three-dimensional solid. Sometimes we call it a polyhedron. It's a three-dimensional solid that has congruent upper and lower bases, okay? So for example, I might have a square here, I'm drawing this in perspective, and I might have a square up here, okay? And you have straight edges connecting those congruent sides, okay? So for example, in this particular case here, and I'll draw kind of a dotted line to show that segment that's in the back here, okay? If these are both congruent squares, we would call this a square prism, okay? And again, if it's perfectly upright, it would be called a right square prism. They can lean, but most of the ones we're going to work with are going to be perfectly vertical, perfectly straight up and down. So anyway, this would be called the base. We could talk about the base edges. The edges in general, the sides are going to be rectangles for prisms, okay? The sides are referred to as the lateral faces. The word lateral refers to side. This would be considered to be a lateral edge, okay? So that would be an example of a prism, okay? Now, there are prisms of whatever shape you want to work with. So I could make a triangular prism. I could have a triangle base, and I could have another triangle up here. Again, these are supposed to be congruent triangles, maybe not drawing that real well. But again, if you have the same bases and rectangular sides connecting those bases, we would call this a triangular prism, okay? And the triangles would be the bases. And by the way, even if you turn it on its side, it's still a triangular prism. You've still got congruent faces across from each other and that sort of thing. I could have a pentagonal prism, okay? I could have a pentagon on top and a congruent pentagon on the bottom. These are great drawings here. And of course you can connect the vertices with straight edges, and that would be a pentagonal prism, a prism that has pentagon bases. But the key again to prisms have two congruent upper and lower bases, and the sides are usually rectangles if they're upright. If they're leaning, they could have parallelogram sides, but we're not really going to see a lot of cases like that. We're going to be working mostly with right prisms, okay? Pyramids. Okay, everybody's familiar with Egypt and the pyramids and that sort of thing. A pyramid has a single base and edges that all meet at one point at the top, not a ridge. They meet at one point at the top. So for example, if I have a square, the pyramids you see in Egypt are usually square pyramids. I can connect those together. This would be called a square pyramid, all right? I could have a triangular base. And I can have a single point above. And if the edges all connect together, that would be a triangular pyramid, okay? Again, I could have some kind of other shape. I could have a pentagon base, okay? And that would be a pentagonal pyramid. The terminology that goes along with these is pretty much the same. We talked about having a base. We could say that that is a base edge. We talked about having sides. Again, the term lateral is used to refer to sides, so we might talk about a lateral edge. That's the basic idea there for a pyramid. So just a little bit of terminology that we're going to be using. A lot of this terminology will actually affect volume more than it will affect surface area. Although, notice, for example, pyramids have triangular lateral faces, whereas prisms have rectangular lateral faces. So it does affect what kinds of shapes we're going to be finding areas of. That's the basic terminology. In the next video, we'll take a look at how to find the surface areas of several different types of shapes.